Hi, is there archaeological proof against creationism?
Is math related to science?
Is math related to science? What are the different types of museums? Do people who visit museums have improved critical thinking skills, and why? But what are museums? The traditional role of museums is to collect objects and materials of cultural, religious, and historical importance, preserve them, research into them, and present them to the public for the purpose of education and enjoyment. There are different types of museums. Archaeology museums, they display archaeological artifacts. They can be open air museums, or they can exhibit items in a building. Art museums, also known as art galleries, they're spaces for showing art objects, most commonly visual art objects as paintings, sculpture, photography, illustrations, drawings, ceramics, or metal work. First publicly owned art museum in Europe was Amerbach Cabinet in Basel. Historic house museums, a house or a building turned into a museum for a variety of reasons, most commonly because the person that lived in it was important or something important happened in it. House is often equipped with furniture like it was in the time when it was used. Visitors of the house learn through guides that tell a story of the house and its inhabitants. History museums, they collect objects that are collected, could be documents, artifacts, archaeological findings, and other. They could be in a building, historic house, or a historic site. Maritime museum. A maritime museum is a museum specializing in the display of objects relating to ships and travel on large bodies of water. A mobile museum is a museum educational outreach program that brings the museum to the people rather than vice versa. Typically, they can be in recreational vehicles or truck trailers that drive to schools, libraries, and rural events. Their business model is to use grant or donor support, as their goal is to make the museum exhibit accessible to underserved populations. And finally, of course, science museums. A science museum is a museum devoted primarily to science. Older science museums tended to concentrate on static displays of objects related to natural history, paleontology, geography, and industrial machinery. Modern trends in museology have broadened the range of subject matter and introduced many interactive exhibits. I really want to say this because otherwise it would keep me up at night. Till now, I didn't know museology is a thing. It's like saying there's a science behind eating your yogurt. Imagine if There's a science about eating frozen yogurt. Yogurtology, maybe. Anyway, many, if not most, modern science museums, which increasingly refer to themselves as science centers or discovery centers, also emphasize technology and are therefore also technology museums. The mission statements of science centers and modern museums vary, but they are commonly places that make science accessible and encourage the excitement of technology and discovery. There was a study where a team of social scientists at the University of Arkansas published in the journal Education Next, an educational researcher found that students who were exposed to cultural institutions like museums and performing arts centers not only had higher levels of engagement with the arts but displayed greater historical tolerance, historical empathy, as well as better educational memory and critical thinking skills. By the way, all of the links will be in the description. So, this study did not look at the effects of taking part in art related activities, but a World Health Organization review of available evidence published earlier this year found that both receptive participation, like visiting a museum, and active participation, like singing in a choir, had health benefits. A trip to the theater, museum, or art gallery could help you live longer. Researchers from University College London found that people who engaged with the arts more frequently, every few months or more, had a 31% lower risk of dying early when compared to those who didn't. Even going to the theater or museum once or twice a year was linked with a 14% lower risk. Engaging with the arts can also act as a buffer against stress and build creativity that allows people to adapt to changing circumstances. It also helps people build social capital, accessing emotional support and information that helps people age more successfully. A greater sense of purpose could also play a role. Now this is the part you've been waiting for. The part where I teach you how to fight. Intellectually. So, ever find yourself disagreeing with a creationist? First thing you can do is get them to an archaeological museum and show them all the fossil proof there is today. But there will be a nuisance. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but surely there is a cherry-picking effort of scientific evidence when it's illogical for people with clear-cut religious persuasion that fossils are science hoax. Moreover, it makes more sense that for them, either the ratified fossil matter doesn't exist because he or she doesn't believe fossils are evidence for evolution. Besides, science is either not clear or convincing about what their age is. So I'm going to explain how scientists have proof about how old fossil remnants are. What are fossils? Fossils are preserved remains of animals, plants, and other organisms from the remote past. Fossils are formed by a continuous process of burying and decomposition over a certain period. When we dig into the earth, the fossils that are closer to the surface are more recent as compared to the fossils found in deeper layers. That's called stratigraphy. Many trees, for example, put together a new ring every year they grow, and you can count backwards and figure out how old the tree is. We also have index fossils, which help us make a close estimate of the years of time in which the fossil was molded. But layers of Earth can change, because when volcanoes erupt, new layers are formed. So what do scientists do when they want to be precise? Well, radiometric dating or radioisotope dating can find the absolute age of a fossil or an ancient artifact. That's how we know that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. But what are isotopes, you might ask?
Every day I'm shuffling.
Isotopes are versions of an atom with extra neutrons in them. Each radioactive isotope decays at an unchanging rate. These measurements give us the half-life. Half-life is the amount of time for a half isotope to decay. You can say that the rate at which an isotope changes is actually what we call isotope's half-life. Uranium-235 has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, so it can be used to date things as old as the solar system itself. That's why oftentimes this type of rock is used for anything. Uranium-235 changes into a different isotope, Lead-207. Uranium-235 had a half-life of over 700 million years. That means that it takes 700 million years for uranium-235 to turn into lead-207. Usually scientists guess the sample's range or span of time. It's easier to guess the age of volcanic rock because newest levels of Earth have almost no argon gas. The older a layer of dirt, the more argon gas it has. Because as the rock gets older, the argon gas is released. Was it another reason to visit a museum?
No, fuck museums.
Yes, it was. Shut up.